Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to the stage Lieutenant General Susan Lawrence, U.S. Army retired, President and Chief Executive Officer of AFCEA International.
Thank you, Ben. Good afternoon. So, if you're still finishing lunch, please feel free to continue. This convention center did an outstanding job. Thank you, convention center. It was a beautiful meal. We are, believe it or not, nearly halfway through West 2026, and the dialogue so far has been energizing and rewarding. The networking has been phenomenal everywhere I went. It's been wonderful. We don't have our final numbers yet, but this is another one of our big ones. Engagements like this, bringing together the military, government, academia, and industry, are essential to keeping pace with the emerging technologies and solutions that sustain maritime dominance. Yesterday morning, we heard from Admiral Cottle, who shared the newly published, unveiled Navy fighting instructions for maritime superiority. And that truly serves to set the tone for this entire conference, including going into last evening's networking session as we went through that. I now would like to acknowledge, and you all have heard me say this, USNI and AFCEA International would not be where we are today without the support of our industry partners. So to our industry partners, thank you so very much for what you do for us. So speaking of one of our great industry partners, we have today Lockheed Martin sponsoring today's session. Please welcome Stephanie Hill, President of Rotary and Mission Systems, to the stage to make some remarks. Stephanie.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. How's everybody doing? All right, very good. Well, thank you so much, General Lawrence, our service chiefs, and really all of you for being here. I'm Stephanie Hill, very privileged to be the president of Rotary and Mission Systems at Lockheed Martin, and I'm deeply honored to join you for West's 36th year. And I'm pleased to welcome you to this session on behalf of AFCEA and the U.S. Naval Institute. This year's theme, Sustaining Maritime Dominance, Warfighting Readiness for the Future Fight, is grounded in the reality that maritime dominance is already being tested in real time, from the seabed to space, and from cyber to information warfare. The future fight demands flexibility, resilience, integration, and adaptability. While I've never had the honor of serving in uniform, I started my career 39 years ago working on the U.S. Navy's Mark 41 vertical launching system as a software engineer, and it's still serving the fleet today. And I recognize that the world is a much more dangerous place than it was when I started, and probably when many of you started. Today's threat environment demands that we rapidly fill capability gaps and invest the resources to sustain them. Our modes of operation in the past are insufficient to secure readiness for today or tomorrow. Lockheed Martin has invested heavily in transforming our own processes and production capability into a model-based enterprise, supported by a digital thread that goes all the way from design, development, test, deployment, and sustainment. One example of this transformation that probably most of you are familiar with is our Aegis over-the-air updates, which proved to be a decisive accelerator in the Red Sea. But we aren't resting on our laurels. We're implementing AI and our algorithms that support data-inundated mission areas, which we have already released to the fleet in multiple domains. We believe that transformation, alongside the services, will supercharge our velocity to innovate at scale together. The changes we are embracing will enable more adaptable, interoperable, and cost-effective solutions. And ultimately, they will usher in a more rapid, prolific, and lethal joint force, one that ensures that the future fight is never a fair one. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. And we appreciate Lockheed's support throughout the years in making sure we have superior dominance in the sea field. Now, I would like this opportunity, please, ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming our panel for this afternoon, our Sea Service Chiefs. I now have the pleasure to introduce our moderator for today's discussion, Rear Admiral Ray Spicer, United States Navy retired, my partner, CEO and publisher, United States Naval Institute.
Thanks, everyone, and welcome to this event. We don't have a whole lot of time, so I'm going to start with some very brief introductions because, one, our panel needs really no introduction, but two, I know you're eager to hear from them, not from me. So to my immediate left, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Eric Smith, a graduate of Texas A&M University, has commanded at every level. As a general officer, he commanded U.S. Marine Corps Forces Southern Command, 1st Marine Division, 3 MEF, Marine Corps Combat Development Command. He became the 39th Commandant of the Marine Corps in September 2023. Welcome, General Smith.
Thanks.
To his left, Admiral Daryl Caudill, Chief of Naval Operations, a graduate of North Carolina State University. His flag officer assignments include Commander, U.S. Fleet Forces Command, Commander, Submarine Forces, Commander, Commander, Submarine Force, U.S. Atlantic and U.S. Pacific Fleets, Vice Director for Strategy, Plans, and Policy on the Joint Staff, J5. He became the 34th Chief of Naval Operations in August 2025. Welcome, Admiral Caudill. And finally, last but not least, certainly, Admiral Kevin Lunday is a graduate of the U.S. Coast Guard Academy, is a career national security attorney and judge advocate. Previous flag assignments included Vice Commandant of the Coast Guard, Commander Atlantic Area, and Commander of the Coast Guard Cyber Command. He became the 28th Commandant of the Coast Guard in January of this year. Welcome, Admiral Lunday.
Thank you.
I'm going to get the conversation started with a few questions, and our panel has graciously agreed to take some audience questions at the end, so I'll be sure that I save some time for that. We have some standing mics out front for you to use. The only ask is that you go light on the commentary and you try to get to the question as quickly as we can so that everybody who has a question can ask them. So I'll get going. Service Chiefs, as you know, our conference theme centers on sustaining maritime dominance and warfighting readiness for the future fight. To set the stage just a bit, I'd like to kick off by talking about what we've seen in recent years with conflict all over the globe. Russia-Ukraine is in their 4th year, almost in their 5th year. Israel-Hamas, Houthi attacks on shipping in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. Add to that the current activity in the Caribbean and under Southcom's AOR. These conflicts have driven a sustained operational tempo that shows no signs of abating. Meanwhile, China has continued to become more aggressive, sowing instability and rapidly growing their combat capability with a shipbuilding capacity that dwarfs our own both in volume and speed. On top of that, our adversaries are collaborating more than ever before. Russia and China operating together at sea, North Korea assisting Russia in Ukraine, and Iran doing what Iran normally does. You each have your own planning guidance and strategies to face the various threats. Where is your focus as your service prepares for the challenges now and in the future? And have the current conflicts or the recently released National Defense Strategy changed the calculus for your approach at all? And finally, what do you envision success looks like at the end of your tenure? So I'll start with General Smith.
So I would say the Marine Corps is on path to comply with the NDS. We envisioned it before it came out. We looked at what Bridge Colby put out. We looked at what the Sec War put out, what the President put out, and that is the impetus for force design. We were just ahead of it. The NDS clarified force design. It reinforced force design, which is we had to be a modern, lethal, mobile force. We had to be able to outstick the adversary. We had to be able to strike at range. We had to be able to hide our signature in plain sight. We had to be able to fuzz up our positioning. We had to be lethal, distributable, and reaggregatable. And so I think that was the impetus behind force design, because we were designed to go fight in Iraq and Afghanistan, which we had done for 30 years, and we were proud to have done it. But it wasn't going to get us anywhere against a pacing threat, a true peer competitor, which we haven't faced since the 1940s. So I think we're on pace and on plan, and we're in keeping with the NDS.
Thank you, sir. Admiral Puddle?
You know, Ray, I would tell you that it shouldn't be lost on anyone in the room that all the things you mentioned, the main effort forces come from the three of us up here. And so how we integrate together with Eric and Kevin and I to do all those operations in those areas around our globe shows the actual, just the incredible capability of the maritime forces and the importance of that force going forward. And so we've just never been in a time and space where the maritime services have been more required and important. Like Eric, you know, I think what I rolled out with the U.S. Navy fighting instructions directly ties to the National Defense Strategy. It is how we will implement that strategy. You know, it's made very clear that the Western Hemisphere will be a primary area of focus, and you see how we're accomplishing that to date. You see our ability to flow that force into the Western Pacific and then flow it, if we need to, into the Arabian Gulf. So this whole idea, the fungibility and scalability and applicability of our forces has never been more demonstrated than what it is right now. We don't have enough. And so all of our force designs can't come to full fruition unless we grow. I need to do more for Eric, to be a better partner with him, with my readiness. You know, I'm trying to help him achieve a 3.0 ARG-MU presence, and that's going to take more force structure. And for him to get his force design, I have to be a good teammate for him. And then I can't do what I want to do, especially when countering illicit traffic, without Kevin being my teammate with his authorities. So this is a work in progress that we continue to work on together.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I think we're going to touch on, or try to touch on, maintenance a little bit, which sort of gets to that 3.0 ARG-MU presence as well.
It does.
Admiral Lende.
Great, thank you. You know, the Coast Guard is undergoing the most significant transformation for our service in over a century. And that's borne out by the Secretary and the President's direction in Force Design 2028 to transform the Coast Guard into a more agile, responsive, and capable force. And it's fueled by an investment, a capital investment that's probably the greatest in our 236-year history, $25 billion to invest in more cutters, boats, aircraft, shore infrastructure, and technology. We are now beginning to emerge from probably one of the worst readiness crises in the last maybe 150 years for the Coast Guard, just due to sustained lack of annual appropriation investment. And so we are getting a level of support and advocacy we have not seen, which is outstanding for us. And it comes at a critical time because we're a unique tool in the arsenal of the United States, because we are a proud member of the Joint Force, and particularly a proud member of the tri-service fleet that Darrell and Eric talked about. But also we sit inside the Department of Homeland Security with a unique set of authorities. And so we have a unique value contribution, not only to the maritime fleet, but also to the national security of the United States. And that's borne out, as we see in the National Security Strategy and the NDS, which has a key focus on the Western Hemisphere, yes, also on the Indo-Pacific, and on supercharging our defense industrial base, as well as some other key areas like assured access to the Arctic region. And in every one of those, we see the Coast Guard's presence, operations, capabilities, and authorities being brought to bear. So it's an incredibly exciting time for our Coast Guard with the operations that are ongoing right now. And of course, we don't do those alone. One of the examples that I think we've seen in the public more recently in the last few months are some of the joint operations between a Coast Guard, integrated Coast Guard, Navy, and Marine Corps team going after the Dark Fleet tankers, which have been very successful, consistent with customary and U.S. international law, and just showing that these threats and challenges in our maritime domain, our tri-service fleet is the way to address those challenges and advance U.S. sovereignty and national security.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to shift now to something you just touched on, but we've been dealing for the last several years with a no real growth top line, but that seems to be changing. The reconciliation bill added $150 billion to defense and national security. The president is also talking about a $1.5 trillion budget for the Department of War at some point. For the Coast Guard, you just touched on it, sir. DHS budgets are also much, much higher. So this is shaping up as a historic opportunity that we may not see levels like this again after 2028. What are your most important capability objectives in this window of opportunity? And are we focusing as much as you'd like on innovation? And do you feel we're doing enough to out-innovate our adversaries? So, General Smith.
Well, we're never doing enough to out-innovate our adversaries because they are very innovative. We can always be more innovative. We've got the Marine Corps University working on that. We've got the Marine Corps Warfighting Lab working on that. We've got Combat Development Integration working on that. We're constantly trying to iterate and trying to get out of our own way, trying to get faster. So we can never iterate fast enough. That'd be my thing. And the first part of your question?
Just with the additional budget that, in the environment that we're in.
So what I would say is everything costs what it costs. I don't want to pay, $4 billion for a ship. Neither does my shipmate Daryl Caudle. But that's what it costs to have pipe fitters, steam fitters, welders, electricians build the ship. And if you don't, it's a little bit like watching the movie Caddyshack. I'm not paying no 50 cents for no Coke. Well, then you ain't getting no Coke. I mean, that's what it costs. I mean, I hate to use old movies as an analogy, but I'm pretty good at my movie analogies. This is what it costs. I don't want to pay $32,000 for my Ford F-250 pickup truck. I wish I paid $32,000 for my Ford F-250 pickup truck. Instead, I paid about $70,000 for it because that's what it costs. And if you don't want something that'll tow 38,000 pounds, then go look elsewhere. And unfortunately, that's what you have to do to keep your employees, because it's really about the industrial base. When we talk about the industrial base, we're not talking about things. We're talking about people. And they have to be paid a living wage, and they have to be able to put their kids into college. They have to be able to learn a skill, and you got to be able to retain them, or they can sell their stuff to Harley Davidson or Tesla Motor Company, and they can, you'll lose that skill set. So to me, that is when people say we're spending too much on defense. I would say the day after you lose the next war, if you can ask yourself, what would I have to go back to the day before the war started? The answer is anything and everything. So.
Mm-hmm. Sir, thank you.
The way I kind of look at this, and I was doing some congressional calls, and one of the senators I was talking with had an interesting plot of since, Reagan's buildup, and maybe even before that, but certainly during that time, plotted across time, when the United States dips below into the less than 3% of our GDP, it's when we see conflict arise, okay? So, I just, in my mind, I just don't see a future in which we don't sustain at least 4%, at least GDP in defense budget. And that to me, I think, if you just go look at that as kind of a line in the sand we should never drop below, is a target we ought to try to aspire to. I agree with Eric. I mean, what you wouldn't do after you lose a war, you kick yourself if you hadn't done that. So, the buying power of the dollar has been a challenge. I look back, 30 years ago, we're about at a place where the buying power is about 3 times less than what it was then for shipbuilding per ton. That's a challenge. And, and what we pay shipyard workers is about equal to what you can make at Buc-ee's. And so that's a problem. And so when I came in the Navy, shipyard workers are making something like 2.5 to 3 times minimum wage. So, workforce is a challenge there. But, my priorities, to answer your question, is shipbuilding, shipbuilding, shipbuilding. We need to deliver our ships. We need to revitalize this. Secretary Phelan has made this crystal clear. That's the president's agenda, and that's why he's on the job, is to go deliver this Navy the nation needs. And that means an all-hands-on-deck approach. Nothing's off the table here to actually go deliver these ships. So that's important, but that takes a workforce. That takes some innovative thinking. It holds some accountability and how we deliver that. So it's extremely important that we think about that. And then at the end of the day, if I had to go prioritize the next 2 things, it'd probably be the challenges with ordnance. You're not going to win a conflict without deep magazines, okay? I know Eric agrees with that. You're not going to win unless I can deliver it. Not every shot's going to be perfect. Some are going to be duds, and some are just going to miss. So I can't be too cute by half on trying to earmark every missile I send and make it perfect. I just got to have deep magazines, okay? So we overwhelm there. And then, as I mentioned in my opening remarks at the keynote, the ability to counter-targeting has to be a priority for us. And so a dollar well spent is a dollar we spend on, it is the tide that raises all of the problems, from his MLRs to Kevin's forces to contested logistics to my striking forces, has to be in an umbrella that can be targeted. So that's how I would give you that as a lay down.
Counter UAS is a part of that, I imagine?
No question, it's a part of it, ashore and at sea.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
So I think for the Coast Guard, we're part of the team, but there are some things that make us distinct, and sometimes, rarely, that's not a good thing. Right now, we are facing a potential lapse at the end of this week in our appropriation, while the rest of the government is already funded for the full year. We are hopeful Congress will pass the appropriation and not let funding lapse and have a third shutdown that would impact us. But if it does, we're concerned about our people being paid, as always, and we're concerned about the impact that's going to have on readiness. And so we need Congress to pass that appropriation and fund the Coast Guard as they have the rest of the joint force. As we talk about this record investment that we've had, my concern is we've got to match that with a higher annual appropriation. The Coast Guard today is a $20 billion organization, still funded at about $13 billion. And we have this great investment for more cutters, boats, assets, but we need the people to crew them. A ship doesn't become a cutter just because you paint it white and put the racing stripe on it. It becomes a cutter when we breathe life into it with the best young men and women from across our United States who are recruited, developed, trained, and then well led. And so we've got to match that with annual operating funds to be able to build that workforce. You asked about the capabilities. This morning we announced the award of a contract that will complete. Now we have all 11 of the Arctic security cutters that the president announced in October are under contract. The first 2 will be delivered in 2028. That will give us assured surface access to the polar regions, but particularly the Arctic. So we're very excited about that. But those 11 ships will take 1,300 Coast Guardsmen to crew and sustain those ships. And they need to be in training right now and being assigned for the ships that will arrive in 2028. And so we need the funding piece. Just as industry needs stable, predictable funding, our joint force needs, every bit of our joint force needs that stable, predictable funding as well.
Sure. And I think in your force design 2028, you talk about manning the Coast Guard by adding 15,000 more Coast Guardsmen.
Yes.
And that's well over a third of your force today, correct? That you need to plus it up by, so it's pretty.
It is. And we've great recruiting success. I think last fiscal year, 6,000 over our 4,400 target. So we've got the position in place to build on that and recruit our 15,000. And I think as Daryl and Eric will tell you, the caliber of the young people joining our military today is as good as it's ever been in any other time in 39 years. And so we're well positioned to move ahead with that growth by 15,000, provided we get the funding from Congress to be able to do it.
Sure.
Ray, I'm just one add on there as Kevin was talking. It is really about funding the tail. And that's what we all struggle with, getting across. It's not the sexy part of the actual acquisition process. It doesn't tie inherently to a constituency. But if you don't get the .mlpf tail, even in the unmanned world, it does not work.
Right.
And so that's an extremely important part of our job.
Sure. It's a good segue to my next question, which is there's always this tension between funding the future, modernization, buying new, and making sure that the current force is ready to go to sea, ready to operate. So how are you approaching that as you look at today's funding streams? And I'll start with Admiral Cottle, because I know you have the biggest chunk of that probably.
You know, if you look at our optimized fleet response plan, OFRP, which is in conception a 36-month conveyor belt that generates force, predominantly strike groups, to do a 7-month deployment, we end up with a target on that at about 42 to 44 months. So I'm over. If you go look at the reason why I'm over, what you'll find at the heart of that is modernization overrun. So in those DDGs in particular, and it can be the carrier itself, when it's in a modernization period, not just a normal maintenance period, those modernizations availabilities are overrunning. And so that's forcing us off plan there to deliver the forces we need by our design of our training and force generation process. So I've been challenging, you know, ASN, RDNA, and SECO, Akano, and others to try to tighten up how we do modernization quite a bit. And, you know, as we roll new ships and platforms off with things like Racks for Life and virtualization of combat systems and things, over-the-air upgrades that Stephanie was talking about, things like that, that's going to work, but I've got a big part of the fleet that can't do that today. So to modernize F-35 mod, even, you know, on a big deck, all those things just take too long. And they're not, and I can't break it up in a way to eat that, you know, that big elephant across availabilities so that I don't have to do it all at once. And there's just way too much whole structure fabrication work that goes into these modernizations as well. So that's a problem. And then at the end of the day, I just have way too many baselines. You know, I don't know the number, but I can tell you it's probably like a number like 40 different baselines in the Arleigh Burke class. When you say the word Canes, it means nothing. You could be Canes 1 that's got Windows NT on it, and you could be Canes 7 that's just been installed on somebody. And yet we call all that Canes. So, you know, this idea of modernization is a very frustrating thing for service chiefs, trying to balance this, because overmatching in our capability, given we're, you know, the size of our force, we have to rely on this, you know, modernization to actually have what it takes to actually overmatch in combat. So I can't just say we're not going to do it. And but I've got to do it much more efficiently and much more on time.
Sure, thank you. Admiral Lindy, you want to throw in your thoughts about the balance between modernization and then the current maintenance?
Thank you. So the key, first of all, the key focus is let's address the immediate maintenance and sustainment challenges we have. And so for example, out of the $25 billion in capital investment from reconciliation, 2.2 billion of that immediately went to depot maintenance, to restocking our inventory control points for aviation and surface fleets, to be able to address our most critical gaps immediately. And then the remainder of that goes really toward modernization and renewing or capital renewal of our fleet. And so we've got to be able to do both at the same time, and not only address the material readiness side, but then the people side to match that. And then we've got to be able to understand clearly at every echelon of the organization and command, and with the chief's mess that really owns and is the stewards of readiness, what do we mean by readiness? How do we understand it? How do we understand it in a way that we can actually take action to address it, and then be able to continually balance that sustainment versus modernization challenge so we get that balance right? If we don't understand what readiness is for whatever the mission is, whether it's emerging or a sustained mission, we're not going to be able to be ready when the mission demand requires, and we're not going to be able to look over the horizon and take the actions and decisions today to position the force with the right capability to be ready for the challenge ahead.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I would echo what Kevin said. You know, we used to, when I was a battalion commander, we had commander's override on our monthly readiness reports. A commander could be at C4, but he could say, I'm ready to fight, Smith sends. And that was what you put at the bottom of your report because you wanted to go to the fight. Nobody wanted to be left at home. So you were at C4 for personnel, C4 for equipment. I'm ready to go, coach, put me in. Smith sends. We don't do that anymore. Now we've got a pretty rigorous process. General Wortman here, General Wellens, General Carter, they have a standard that they have to meet that says you're at 42% of your manning, you are not combat ready. Your aircraft are at 50% readiness, you're not combat ready. You don't get to do a commander's override. You can commander's override a little bit, but you can't commander's override everything. So a lot of it is determining what is combat ready. In our case, we're a little bit easier because it's about manpower, but you can't be at 42% of your manning because you're in the middle of the summer move period and say, I'm combat ready. You have to actually have denominators. You got to have an actual checklist that says this unit has met its METs, its mission essential task lists, and it is ready to fight. It's got its personnel, it's got its funding, it's got its spare parts, it's got its readiness, its aircraft are up. I was just out flying with the Death Rattlers yesterday. I got flying in an F-18, so bucket list, boom, check. And I didn't puke either, which is good because that would have been pretty embarrassing. But that squadron is ready because they can prove it. They can quantify it. They've got ex-pilots who have done their syllabus. They've got ex-aircraft that are up and ready to go. They may not be able to conduct their full mission profile, but they know that they're at 75% of their mission profile. They can conduct everything in the daylight, and then they're working on night attack. Okay, but there's got to be a metric and a standard for what is ready. That's half the battle, is determining what is your standard for readiness.
Sure. I know Admiral Cottle's going to chirp in here because you just rolled out your fighting instructions, and part of that is this concept of combat surge ready, which you're setting the standard at 80%. Can you talk a little bit about that? What that means? Does that equal forward presence? Does that equal you're ready, pier side ready to go when called, or combination thereof?
Yeah, I can talk to it. We have a 300-ship Navy. We have about 100 ships deployed worldwide any given day. We have about 100 ships on the blocks any given day, and I have 100 that are in some state of fourth generation. And so as I talked about in my remarks, too long the Navy is, for that third 100, has had an all or nothing approach. So you can imagine no naval combat power until it's completed with its Comp-2X, and then it becomes a 1 and it deploys. It comes back from that and becomes a 0 again. And so in that period of time, in that 3-year cycle, of that extra 100, the Navy can just do more than that. We don't have to be a 0 or a 1. And so this idea of combat surge ready is setting a set of certification requirements in between the inter-deployment cycle that you aspire to achieve at a certain amount, at a certain time, such that you're certified to go into combat if called. So it actually is trying to quantify, really, to be honest with you, what really SURF is all about from the deployed readiness tables. And so, I can give you, like, for a submarine, it comes back from deployment, it goes through some of its basic workups, it completes its combat or tactical readiness evaluation, it is now combat surge ready. For a surface ship, it goes through a very similar process. When it completes its surface warfare advanced training, it's SWAT, it's combat surge ready. An air wing, when it completes air wing Fallon, it's combat surge ready. At the end of the day, combat surge ready ships are able to shoot, defend, communicate, and maneuver within an acceptable level of risk of that certification. And if you've got to actually flow the tip fed, they're going. And so if you can imagine, had I not done that way, then we'd just be emptying the piers with a bunch of ships, then we'd have no sense of where they could actually do in combat. And a lot of people are going to die like that. So this idea, we set a target at 80% of those forces, allow that 100 that's already deployed, an additional 80 could flow in with high confidence that they can significantly add to the fight. Right now, I would say the submarine force sits around 70-some% of that. The Arleigh Burkes are probably in the, mid to 70% on that. Our amphib ships are not there yet. They're probably around 60, in the 60s, and working on that every single day. So by the end of my tenure, we will be at 80% on this. We'll get there. It's going to happen. Now, I'll go back to Kevin's point, he mentioned this, you got to have people. Okay, you got to be whole across Pesto. I got to have the ordinance. I can't wait to the strike group that's currently deployed to come back for me to, transfer the ordinance from that strike group to the next strike group. So if you're not whole across Pesto, it doesn't mean anything. And then to Eric's point, this idea of what systems have to be full up around to be combat surge ready is in accordance to the community that owns that platform, but it's rigorous. So it's not made up, so those systems have to be online and have to be made available to go. So it's we're tracking that very closely, and it's well documented. And so that's in a nutshell what CSR is all about.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to try to zip through 2 more questions, and then I want to make sure we save time for audience questions. The audience, they're going to ask the hard questions. But you talked about people, and it seems like across the board, we're doing really well in retention, recruiting. I think people want to serve. Can you talk briefly about some of the initiatives that you've implemented to ensure that we're recruiting our best and finest and that we're retaining the people that we want to retain?
Yeah, I'll start. Recruiting, the Marine Corps doesn't miss mission. I'll stop. That's not what we do. We don't fail. My own son just finished a recruiting tour. If he didn't make his mission, he got fired. He didn't get fired. He gets to come home for Christmas. We just don't miss recruiting mission. It's just a job. You go get it done. I'll stop. It's about retention. You can't recruit your way out of this problem. The dynamics of the population base are such that you can't recruit your way out of this problem. Because once you take into account who is not qualified to serve, from the QMA, qualified male applicants, is what we base it on. We do recruit females, obviously, but we base our numbers off of QMA, qualified male applicant base. And if you've taken ADHD meds, you're not eligible. Well, I had ADHD till Sister Mary Catherine smacked it out of me, and then I didn't have it anymore. So just because you had ADHD meds shouldn't mean that you're not qualified to serve, but currently that is a requirement that says you're no longer qualified to serve. If you've had certain bone fractures, you're not qualified to serve. Well, that doesn't make any sense to me. If I was going to keep every Marine that I recruited for 30 years, that would make sense because I'm going to have to pay disability. But most Marines come in, serve for 4 years, get out and go on with their lives. That's just the fact that most Marines do that. So we've got to target our young people such that those who want to serve can serve, because recruiting is our lifeblood. And we have a pyramid. We come in with 4 at fire team, and you end with 1 fire team leader. So we're 4 to make 1. That's how we do it. You also can't afford to pay everybody to become a master sergeant. We don't need a bunch of master sergeants. We need a bunch of lance corporals turning wrenches on planes. I don't need a bunch of staff sergeants turning wrenches on planes. I don't need staff sergeants pulling the trigger in Christian's meth. I need lance corporals pulling that trigger. So we make our monetary goal by keeping our ranks very junior. We can meritoriously promote, but most Marines, again, will come in, and the vast majority will get out after 4 years, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. That's okay.
Sure. Thank you.
The Navy loses about 10% of our size every year. We're about 350,000. We lose 35,000 for the last 2 years. We brought in over 45,000 sailors. This has made a significant dent in our gaps at sea, filling critical billets that I've never been able to do ashore. And so we are having record recruiting. And part of this is putting a significant emphasis, and not to the extent that Eric has done in the Marine Corps, but a much larger effort on recruiting, so that we are really putting really talented people to do one of the hardest, if not the hardest things we do, is to get a very small population of people, less than 1%, to go join when we're in competition across the joint force for the same people. And so it's tough, but we're doing well there. Record retention, okay? And that's because the mission is so good. Mission is why we're there. And so I'm in a good place there on that. And so I got a little bit different problem than Eric does. The experience it takes as naval systems get more and more complex, my experience level does have to follow the shot there a bit. And so, so I do worry that in certain rates, if I get too thin there with the complexity of what we're seeing in complex environments like the Red Sea, that I can get a little mismatch. And this is part of the reason why artificial intelligence and battle management decision aids and tools to allow us to see ourselves, all those things are so important to enable the experiential level to not be so high that it hurts my ability to get a sailor there in the complexity that's ever growing. So that matching of us to be able to do our job with the tools they need, while I can only ingest and introduce that into people's brains at a certain pace, is a place I need continued help. But we're in a good place here on people. And so I'm happy about that. And so it's been a success story.
Thank you, sir.
Well, I talked about emerging from a readiness crisis on the Coast Guard. And over 3 years ago, we were 10% short in our enlisted workforce on the Coast Guard, the backbone of our service. And so because of investments in recruiting, we've seen recruiting improved, as I talked about, record set of recruiting last year that we're going to continue to build on. We've also seen improvements in our retention. And that we have not changed, as Daryl and Eric said, we have not changed the standards for a session. And so we're still getting the caliber and quality of young people coming in and joining the service. And that's critically important. One of the other pieces is when we talk about readiness and all the different ways we think about it, and I know this is the same for the Navy and the Marine Corps, but the readiness of the service starts with the readiness of every single Coast Guard man and woman and their families. On that cornerstone, we build the readiness of the crew, the unit, and the force. And so we have to invest in that accordingly and put the Coast Guardsman, the Marine, and the sailor front and center and keep that front and center. That's something Master Chief Post, the Coast Guard, Waldron, and I talk about all the time. And that's vital to our success as a service because it's not, yes, we need the most advanced technology. We need to know how to adapt and bring that to bear as a capability. We are in a competition with adversaries that are trying to race to do that as well. But in all of that, what will be our strategic advantage as a joint force are our people, right? That form into crews and teams in a force that is unstoppable and will prevail in any conflict. And that remains, it always has been, and will remain our strategic advantage.
Thank you, sir. Okay, this is my last question. So start lining up with your questions. Obviously, this is a very industry-rich audience. All you have to do is walk the floor and see tons of industry, and they produce phenomenal capabilities. Can you just briefly touch on what you feel you need industry to do to help you accomplish your goals? And then is there anything that you think that you owe back to industry? Because a lot of times we talk about industry needs stability and requirements or things like that in order to invest in the things that we need them to invest in, but things like that. So what do you need from industry and what do you feel that you owe industry? I'll start with Emelinde.
Well, let me flip it around. I think what we owe industry first is to make sure we can give you discipline requirements that are tailored, that are not overly tailored and boutique, that are almost impossible to deliver, and that mean we're going to have delays in schedule and we're going to have an increase in cost, which is what we traditionally do. So for the Arctic security cutters, our key performance parameters, there were less than 6 of them for the entire system rather than hundreds of pages, which is our typical approach. And then the stable, predictable funding that lets industry make the capital investments and expenditures necessary, whether it's a shipyard that hires a workforce knowing that they have a program through block buy or reconciliation funding, and then they can hire and make the capital investment that's necessary to then produce at speed and scale, which we need them to. And so I think that's vital. What we need from industry is to be able to make those investments when you have the funding so that we can move together and then we can hold each other accountable. We can be accountable for delivering what we need to industry, and then we can hold industry accountable for providing the capabilities that we need when we need them.
Thank you.
Yeah, what I need is when I have a contract with you, you deliver it on time. That's really what I need. I don't know how to sugarcoat that. It's impossible to sugarcoat that. I need my stuff on time. And there's a wide recognition that comes with an ROI that's expected. And there's no pushback on that. We want companies to be profitable. We want them to be sustainable. And we want them to be, good partners. But when I go into business with you, I actually need my stuff on time. So that's number one. And so it won't matter what kind of acquisition reform I do. and I can go, put a bow on that, at the end of the day, that thing's going to end up being a contract with somebody. And it's going to be for a bunch of money and a capability I'm going to get and a due date. And that's when I need it. And so we just have to be very transparent about that. So I'd rather, go into that contracting strategy and negotiation with that in mind and be very honest about that so that I'm not, I want to over deliver and kind of, under promise a bit there. So that's point one. I couldn't agree more with Kevin. On being a good partner, we do owe industry a time horizon that they can stabilize their workforce. And they've got to understand what that time horizon is. We play games with this stuff with single year money and single year contracts. I'm in a CR for half the year, then I try to go actually get this stuff under contract. It's ridiculous. Okay, the things that we do sometimes, it's just by its very design cannot possibly work very well. I'm not a big fan on private, I talk to a lot of our private shipyards that do a lot of our surface ship maintenance. And I do these just-in-time contracts, and it don't prevent the planning to be done, the long lead time material to be purchased. I don't know why I don't have a 5-year horizon with the shipyards that do my surface ship maintenance and just, get those things in their horizon. Stabilize that workforce, and then about the 2 to 3 year point, it's another rolling 5. We're just rolling all the time.
Right.
And so, stability, they deserve that. Nobody wants to work for a company where they don't see what's coming. There's an old saying I go by, if you don't promise me the next one, you don't get the last one. And so that's where I find myself a lot of times.
Sure. Thank you. Coming out?
Yeah, I would echo what my two compatriots have said. It's all about cost, performance, and schedule. And sadly right now it's mostly about cost and performance and schedule. I'm buying something and I expect it to shoot 200 miles. 180 miles isn't good enough. I paid for 200 miles. I expect to get 200 miles out of my missile, and I expect to get it on time. And if it's going to be delayed, well, that's a you problem. That's not a me problem, because I paid for something and I expect to get it. And so I think, I'm not here to tell industry how much profit you should make. I mean, this is America. You can make as much as you want. But again, I'm interested in getting something for the warfighter at the best cost I can get. And what I'm not interested in is, well, we can get you just a little bit more if. We can get you just a little bit more when. Nope. I paid for this. I know what I need. I'm a recovering requirements officer. I need a missile that shoots X miles. If you have something that you can give me for the same cost and on the same performance, same schedule, but it goes 250 miles, then that's great. I'll take it.
I'll take some of those too.
Take some of them, yep. But you got to keep on cost, performance, and schedule, because again, it's not my money, it's the American taxpayers' money, and I have to go to the Hill and try to get it. And then, you go to the Hill to try to get them to give it to me. And I'm grateful for that. But it is about the young warfighter who's going to go to war with the equipment that we provide him, we as a team. So it is a team sport here. I mean, my relationships with Lockheed Martin, my relationships with Boeing, they're very, very good. But again, cost, performance, and schedules. And excuses are like blanks. Everybody's got one. If I give you bad requirements, then you should give me a bad product. But I don't. I give you very detailed requirements. And if they're too much, then it's got to be a two-way street. You got to tell me, hey, look, that you've given me 40 pages of requirements. And because of that, I'm going to have to build you a widget that will withstand a nuclear blast. And you don't need that. Okay, that's a conversation I'm willing to have. How to dumb down my requirements, how to reduce them to reduce cost, increase performance, and increase schedule. That's a conversation I'm willing to have. But what I'm not interested in, I always say that when I come to these events, I feel like a man in a meat suit walking around a dog pound. Hey, I just need 5 minutes. I just need 5 minutes. I'm trying to sell you this. I know what I need because it's laid out for you through my Combat Development Integration Command. Jerry Carter lays it out. Christian Wortman lays it out. Paha Wellens lays it out. I know what I need. Just, man asked for a ham sandwich, give him a ham sandwich. Joe Dunford, it's a good quote. Man asked for a ham sandwich, just give him a ham sandwich. So that's what I'm here to do. I'm just looking for a ham sandwich. So.
With that, we'll open it up to audience questions. So I see gentleman there on my left.
Yes, sir. General, Admirals, thank you for your service to our great nation. My name is Tom Huntley. I'm General Manager of Region Defense. We build unmanned and manned high-speed maritime transportation solutions, both commercial and defense. I just want to build on this this question that you asked, sir. From industry, we are ready to move at breakneck speed. We want to go, Admiral Linde, the 6 requirements, that is the way to go. We know what we need to build. It needs to go faster, carry more stuff, go longer, and be cheaper. And we're going to do most of those, and we're going to balance it the best we can. The problem is, how do we dive that down into the staff, right? We're a proud partner, General Smith, with Marine Corps Work Funding Lab. It took 4.5 months to do a modification on an OTA. That's 4.5 months that I couldn't hire staff, that I couldn't build out the workforce, that I couldn't rebuild the American maritime industrial base. We are ready to go. So how can we, I just want to pull that thread again, how can we as industry help build that speed that y'all are talking about, that the president's talking about, SecWar is talking about, but sometimes there's a contracting officer or a regulator or what have you that is still waiting on the signature in triplicate, it seems. So how can we help speed that process out? And thank you so much for being here today, all of you.
Yeah, I would offer just very briefly, just be a good partner with us. Help us go to the Hill with the same message. You know, one message, many messengers. You know, when I'm talking to Senator Ernst or when I'm talking to Senator King, you know, you should be saying the same thing as me. And it's not that we're conniving, we're cooperating to make sure we both deliver a product on cost, on schedule, and that meets its performance parameters. And I think a lot of that has to do with the way we're funded. And that goes with Congress, because they can appropriate multi-year funding or they can do single-year funding. And nobody likes to do multi-year funding. But unfortunately, multi-year funding is the coin of the realm, because that's, you know, otherwise I'm going year to year and I'm giving you, you know, $100 million this year and nothing the next year. And you can't operate that way. So I think we have to collaborate, you know, and I say that in the good sense of the word, not that we're conniving, but that we're collaborating and cooperating on our messaging to the Hill that, hey, we need multi-year funding. And Congress doesn't like to give multi-year funding because they like to hold the purse strings pretty tightly. But, you know, if you hold them too tightly, you get what you get, which is herky-jerky, fits and starts defense industry, which costs inevitably go up. So I would say that.
You know, I think some of this has to do with where decision rights land and the transparency and battle rhythm that we find ourselves in to expose a problem before it gets so far down the road that I can't recover from it. I'm inundated with this problem. It can be an operational thing, it can be a shipyard problem, it can be a procurement acquisition problem. I've got, you know, I'll just say 06s, program managers, project team leaders, the like, that are dutifully trying to do their job, thinking that they can solve this thing that's growing in time and space, and that they're going to get it back on track, but they don't. And by the time they actually make it to a level that I understand it, I can't recover. You've backed me into a corner. There is no COA. The only COA is to eat the delay. And so the problem is the way we need to go structure this is push the authority and decision rights down, okay, and move transparency up and get these programs and these processes into a visible battle rhythm at the right level of authority that we can see this and get this stuff back on the rails before it grows to a point that's unrecoverable.
Sir.
I think for Coast Guard, one of our 4 campaigns in Force Design 28 is to create an acquisition and contracting superhighway. And that's not just about making sure we can move at speed and scale. It's a cultural mindset change. It's a realization that a lot of the requirements and the bureaucracy we've built around contracting acquisition was probably intended to reduce risk doesn't do that. It introduces more risk. It slows us down rather than helping us manage risk and move at the speed we need to deliver what we need to. And that's before you even get to FAR reform. That's in our current system. And so we in the Coast Guard, we realize we've got to do better at that. And some of that is cultural. It's not just improving our processes and the decision authority at the right level that Daryl talked about.
Sir. Thank you all very much.
I'm going to turn it back to, I see a sailor standing out there, and I apologize. I should have gone to you first. So we may have time for one, maybe two questions, and I see 1,000 people lined up. So go ahead.
Good afternoon, Commandant of the Marine Corps, Chief of Naval Operations, Commandant of the Coast Guard. My name is H2 Goodwin. I'm from 1st Marine Division. I'm a combat trauma management instructor there. And my question poses more or less on what the next threat poses. So my question is, to close the lag between validated trauma care, updates and formal curriculum revision, could we institutionalize a rapid update construct similar to software patching that authorizes fleet implementation through NAVADMIN and/or MARADMIN with the unit level validation? Like an analogy for Top Gun, Maverick didn't wait for the next syllabus revision while the MiGs changed their tactics. He adapted right in the air. Shouldn't trauma, the doctrine, do the same? Move at the same speed of maneuver?
Yeah, hey, Doc, God bless you. I got treated when I got shot in 2004, I was treated by a corpsman on scene, patched me up, got me to a Roll 3 medical facility, and I'm still here today. So God bless you for being a doc, because we love our corpsmen in the Marine Corps. Thanks for being a Greenside doc. One of the things that we have to do to increase combat surgical care is room temperature blood products. And I always say this, I'm sort of answering your question, but I'm sort of answering the question I want to answer. I got taught that in school. We've got to get to where we can use room temperature blood products, because when I have to refrigerate whole blood, it doesn't work. You know, we can have walk-in blood banks, but then you got to type everybody. It doesn't really work. We got to have room temperature blood products. That's something I push on DARPA. Every time I go there, I pound on that and say, hey, where's my room temperature blood products? And they're working on it. I don't know that there is a solution, but I think we got to get to room temperature blood products, and we got to untie your hands, because if there's not a combat surgeon at hand, we're going to have to use teledoc. You know, so why can't I open up my comm architecture to have you, who's forward as an HM, soon to be a chief, I hope. We'll get to where you can do some combat surgery, because you're going to do it anyway. You might as well do it under supervision. So that's about the best I can do for you on that.
I think Doc beat your movie reference there, Commandant, with the Top Gun.
Yeah.
What I would just tell you is, if you could, you seem to be well thought out on this issue. And just shoot me a note with kind of what you're thinking about, the gap analysis that you're talking about, so I can not try to say something off the cuff here on something I think really needs to be looked at a curriculum level, so that we can land exactly what you're talking about. And I'll get with my medical team to really try to understand exactly what you're telling me that needs to be changed, so I'm delivering corpsmen that can actually do what you're describing. So just push that up to my team, and we'll take a hard look at it.
Will do, Chief of Naval Operations.
Thank you.
Could I just, could I ask the service chiefs if we could do one more question? I know we're running a little bit late. Okay, one more question. The young lady there at the standing mic.
Good afternoon. Thank you for taking my question. I resonated when we mentioned earlier the possibility to increase recruiting standards in the future by allowing screening of personnel who might have an ADHD background or some sort of medical condition. I'm raised on it a lot, and some people in this room might have served in a time where people who are legal citizens but may not have citizenship at the time were allowed to join, with the incentive of sometimes having citizenship. What is the current stance of maybe one day bring this back, and what can we do to maybe get started on that initiative once again?
Well, what I would say is that is a matter of national policy. That's not for us to decide. That is a OSW, an Office of Secretary of War decision. You must be a U.S. resident, you must be a legal resident to enlist in the Marine Corps. All stop. I mean, that is U.S. policy. So you can enlist if you're a green card holder, but you must possess a green card, or you must be a legal permanent resident to enlist. That's just national policy. All stop. So that is beyond our issue to control, I think, as service chiefs.
Yeah, we do. We have naturalization programs that exist. with our boot camp. I've attended those at boot camp at Great Lakes. But General Smith is right on that. We don't set that policy, that core requirement. We just execute that. But I mean, I think I can speak my two shipmates up here. We all want people who can, that meet the requirements to serve, to have the opportunity to serve.
Yep.
And the general gave, a couple things with the ADHD and those types of things, where the risk of those things need to be put on us, the people sitting up here, not the medical community. Yep. You need to describe the risk, but you're not the yes or no.
Right.
And the yes or no on all these types of things needs to be up here with us. So, but there are certain ones that we just don't own the yes or no to. And I think that's what the general is getting at.
Yep.
If I could just piggyback on that, Master Chief Pettis, the Coast Guard and I sponsored one of our recruit companies at our training center at Cape May. And in each ceremony, usually in every week, there will be someone who's naturalized as part of that. And so the way they do that, Citizenship Immigration Services comes, and they will administer the oath of citizenship for naturalization before they join their classmates and take the oath of enlistment in the Coast Guard again, before they head out to the fleet. And as excited as all the parents are to watch them swear their oath of enlistment, when those 2 or 3 young people become naturalized U.S. citizen, the crowd goes wild. There is so much excitement to see citizens made as they are stepping forward to serve in uniform. It's one of the greatest things I think I've seen in the last several years. And it's just, I know you guys do that as well. It's a really successful program.
We do.
Yeah, and you can do it much faster by joining the Marine Corps or joining the service. By joining the service. I'm just speaking as a Marine, so.
Oh, it's always about the Marine Corps.
I get paid for it, so.
That was the last question. Thank you very much.
Please welcome General Lawrence back to the stage.
Admiral Spicer, Admiral Cottle, Admiral Lunday, and General Smith, thank you for taking the time to join us today. Great discussions, hard solutions we have to get after, but we're right on point with the discussions as we did that. On behalf of AFC International and the Naval Institute for joining us today, we would like to present to you the Historic Power of Fleets in Being, edited by SCM Payne. There's a lot of activity still happening out there, team, around the building for the remainder of the day. Consult your app and look at the sessions still to come. I'd also like to remind all of you of the happy hour at Horizon Networking Reception this evening at 3:45 to 5 o'clock. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of the solution. Thanks.